He comes home from work, drained, not just from his job, but from life. The silence in the house cuts deeper than any scream. His wife, once his best friend, now treats him like a burden. No warmth, no respect, no desire. Just a man sitting in a house he pays for, yet doesn't feel at home in. This isn't rare. This is modern marriage. In a world where marriage used to mean partnership, it now often means pressure. What once gave men purpose now leaves them hollow. And today, we'll expose the brutal truth, why modern marriage no longer makes sense for men, and why walking away might be the only sane choice. Number 1. The erosion of male respect. Respect is oxygen for men. It's not a luxury, it's a psychological necessity. Without it, men don't erupt, they erode. Slowly, quietly, internally. Modern culture has reframed male respect not as something sacred, but as optional, negotiable, even laughable. Today's man, particularly within the institution of marriage, finds himself in a landscape where he is expected to give endlessly, his time, his energy, his stability, while receiving little more than polite tolerance in return. The loving reverence that once underpinned the marital bond has, in many homes, been replaced with subtle mockery, dismissal, or complete emotional invisibility. Television portrays him as the bumbling fool. Social media amplifies his mistakes, but rarely his worth. And in his own house, he's often spoken to last and listened to least. This isn't just about ego, it's about identity. When a woman loses respect for her man, something vital begins to die in the relationship. Not just intimacy, but connection, passion, trust. Because men are not starving for sex. That's the surface. What they crave, at their core, is acknowledgement. To be seen. To be valued not just for what they do, but for who they are. When respect evaporates, so does the emotional oxygen that allows a man to stand tall in his own home. And he doesn't always shout about it. He gets quieter, withdraws, numbs out. Not because he doesn't care, but because he no longer feels like he matters. That is the quiet epidemic no one wants to name. Men starving not for touch, but for truth, for the feeling that their presence still carries weight. In marriage, in media, in the world. Number 2. Emotional neglect is the new normal. Most men don't walk away from marriages because they've discovered someone younger, prettier, or more exciting. They leave because they've become invisible. Not in the literal sense, but emotionally. Gradually, and often without confrontation, a man can become a ghost in his own relationship. His efforts go unnoticed. His needs go unmet. His words, when spoken, bounce off walls instead of landing in a listening heart. In this kind of emotional vacuum, his confidence doesn't just waver, it withers. He begins to internalize the silence, mistaking neglect for a verdict on his worth. Over time, he questions himself. Am I a bad partner? A failure? Unlovable? The damage isn't loud or explosive, it's a quiet corrosion. A slow fading of color from his inner world. And when he finally does find the courage to speak, when he says something's wrong, I'm not okay, I feel alone, he's often met not with empathy, but with dismissal. Man up, don't be so sensitive, as if masculinity were a muzzle. But true masculinity isn't defined by emotional suppression. It's defined by the courage to be known, to risk vulnerability, to say, I matter too. And yet in today's marriages, that voice is rarely welcomed. Too often, men become unheard guests in their own lives, present but unacknowledged, reliable but emotionally homeless. What many call stability is sometimes just resignation. Because when a man realizes that his feelings aren't safe in the one place they should be, he stops sharing them. Then, eventually, he stops showing up at all. And that's the tragic irony. Men don't want out. They want in. They just don't want to keep knocking on a door that no one ever opens. Number 3. Financial suicide in a pretty box. Modern marriage, for many men, has become a beautifully packaged risk, an emotional promise wrapped around a financial trap. On the surface, it's sold as love, partnership, and forever. But beneath the vows and cake lies a hard truth. For men, marriage today is also a contract with potentially devastating consequences. If it ends, and increasingly it does, he doesn't just lose a relationship. He can lose everything he spent years, even decades, building, half his savings or more. Ongoing alimony, child support that sometimes exceeds his ability to live independently, tens of thousands in legal fees, and perhaps most bitterly, the very house he bought, furnished, and maintained might no longer be his. The courtroom, for many divorced men, is not a place of justice. It's the site of emotional and financial execution. There, a man can watch his life's work divided up like spoils of war, often with little regard for his sacrifices. He may have worked 60-hour weeks to provide, only to be painted as emotionally absent. He may have prioritized family over personal dreams, only to be portrayed as replaceable. And the deepest irony? The man who built the life, brick by brick, can be ordered to leave it all behind with the stroke of a pen. Recovery isn't guaranteed. Many men never financially rebound. They downsize their lifestyle, delay retirement, sometimes sleep in cars or spare rooms while still funding the life they're no longer allowed to be part of. It's not bitterness, it's reality. Marriage, once a cornerstone of stability, now feels like a gamble where the house always wins. And for the modern man, the question lingers long after the papers are signed. Was it love, or was it a beautifully disguised bet that cost him everything? Number 4, fatherhood without power. Becoming a father should be one of the most defining and sacred milestones in a man's life. But for too many, it becomes the beginning of a quiet heartbreak. In theory, fatherhood means leadership, presence, guidance. In practice, especially post-divorce, it often means powerlessness. He's not the captain of the ship. He's the passenger, occasionally allowed on deck, but rarely trusted to steer. The legal system, built on outdated assumptions, still overwhelmingly favors mothers, regardless of the facts. He provides financially, sometimes exhaustively, yet he's granted the bare minimum of access to the children he helped bring into the world. 2 weekends a month, a few hours on holidays, the occasional video call squeezed between school and bedtime. It's not co-parenting, it's supervised visitation by another name. When he challenges the system, asks for more time, seeks equal custody, he's often labeled difficult, unstable, even vindictive. Not because he's unfit, but because he dares to ask for fairness in a framework that expects him to quietly comply. But here's the darkest truth of all. Men aren't just losing their wives in modern divorces. They're losing their children. They're watching birthdays happen without them, missing milestones, becoming strangers to the very souls they once held in their arms. Slowly, painfully, they're being erased from their own bloodline, and society barely notices. There's no outrage, no movement, just a cultural shrug, as if fathers are accessories, not essentials. But children feel that absence, even if they can't name it. And fathers, reduced to visitors, paychecks, signatures, carry that wound silently. Because in today's world, to be a man is to love your children deeply while fighting a system that treats your love as second tier. And that fight, it leaves scars that don't fade. Number 5, sexless marriages are the hidden epidemic. It rarely happens all at once. It starts subtly. I'm tired. Not tonight. Maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow rarely comes. What begins as the occasional brush-off becomes a pattern, then a routine, then a wall. For countless men, marriage slowly transforms into a desert of intimacy. No touch, no spark, no warmth. It's not about craving sex like a hormone-fueled teenager. It's about longing for connection, affirmation, the simple, sacred feeling of being wanted, not just needed, but desired. Because when a man reaches for his partner and is met with rejection again and again, something inside begins to shift. The rejection doesn't just land on his body, it lands on his spirit. He starts to ask himself silent questions. Am I unattractive? Unworthy? Invisible? And he carries those questions everywhere. Into work, into fatherhood, into the mirror. Over time, his vulnerability hardens into frustration. His hope calcifies into silence. And beneath that silence, resentment grows, not loudly, but like a slow poison. He still shows up, pays the bills, tucks the kids in, but emotionally, he's pulling away. Because no man can thrive in a relationship where he feels like a burden just for wanting closeness, where his needs are treated as shameful, where the very thing that was once a shared language of love has become a source of tension, guilt, or manipulation. What makes it worse is how few people talk about it. Sexless marriages are a quiet epidemic, tucked behind curated social media posts and polite smiles at dinner parties. But behind closed doors, many men are suffering, not because they want more sex, but because they want to feel seen. To feel like their presence still stirs something in the heart of the person they chose. And when that dies, something sacred dies with it. Number 6, the loss of identity. A man doesn't get married to vanish. He gets married to build, to share a life, not surrender his own. But somewhere along the way, the promise of partnership becomes a slow erasure of self. It begins subtly. He skips a weekly game night to stay home, puts away the guitar because it's too loud, stops seeing old friends because it causes tension. Hobbies turn into distant memories. His passions gather dust. And each compromise, though small, chips away at the person he used to be. Not because he's weak, but because he wants peace. He wants harmony. So he silences parts of himself to avoid conflict. Until one day, there's nothing left to silence. Over the years, the man who once laughed easily, chased dreams, and had a clear sense of self becomes a stranger to his own reflection. He's a provider now, a helper, a handyman, a chauffeur, a quiet fixture in a life that used to excite him. And the tragedy is, this loss doesn't usually feel like a crash. It feels like slow drowning. He doesn't even realize how far he's drifted from himself until the marriage begins to crumble. Then comes the panic, not just of losing a partner, a home, or a routine, but of realizing he no longer knows who he is without them. He thought marriage would complete him, but instead, it consumed him. And when the foundation finally cracks, he's not standing on solid ground. He's standing on dust. With no identity to return to, no passions to reignite, no map back to the man he used to be. Because when a relationship asks for everything and gives nothing back, what's lost isn't just time or love, it's self. And reclaiming that self? It's a journey most men don't know how to begin. Number 7, cultural programming against masculinity. From the earliest years, boys are trained, not in strength, but in submission. Be nice. Don't be too loud. Don't be too rough. Never show anger. Apologize for taking up space. And by the time they become men, this conditioning has hardened into a quiet script they follow without question. Keep giving. Don't upset her. Try harder. Be better. Be smaller. They enter marriage believing that if they love enough, give enough, sacrifice enough, they will finally be seen as enough. But that moment never arrives. Instead, their masculinity, once a source of protection, stability, and strength, is treated as a problem to fix. Society has subtly but relentlessly trained women to view male authority not as leadership, but as danger. A man who speaks with confidence is controlling. A man who sets boundaries is toxic. Even a man who leads with love, who sacrifices with dignity, is often viewed with suspicion, as if any act of masculine presence is a power play waiting to explode. And so, the more he tries to step up, the more he is pushed down. This isn't progress, it's sabotage, not through violence or rage, but through the slow erosion of purpose. What was once a partnership becomes a minefield of second-guessing, walking on eggshells, and emotional self-censorship. He no longer feels free to be himself. Only a version of himself that won't offend, won't assert, won't lead. And in trying to be the safe man society demands, he becomes invisible, numb, powerless. This is the unspoken crisis. Masculinity isn't broken, it's buried. Trained out of men from boyhood, punished in marriage, and pathologized in public. And the result? A generation of men confused not by who they are, but by why being who they are is no longer allowed. Number 8. The peace of non-marriage. Now shift the lens. Look at the man who chose not to marry, not out of bitterness, but out of awareness. He's not lonely. He's not lost. He's free. While others scramble to hold together identities built around someone else's approval, he stands rooted in his own. He has financial clarity, no fear of courtroom battles, no alimony threats, no child support orders draining his future. He lives in the home he paid for, invests in the future he chooses, and spends his energy building an empire that won't be split in half with a signature. Emotionally, he's stable, not because he avoids connection, but because he refuses to tie his value to someone else's moods or expectations. He dates on his terms, authentically, without fear that every conversation is a negotiation for permanent obligation. He gives what he wants to give, not what he's guilted into. There's no walking on eggshells, no fear that a single disagreement will unravel his entire life. He sleeps soundly, not because life is easy, but because he's not at war in his own home. And here's the part that confuses the world. He's not selfish. He's strategic. He's looked at the modern landscape of marriage, a system that demands endless giving and offers little in return, and said, no, thank you. Not out of resentment, but out of reason. He understands that peace isn't found in sacrifice without reward. It's found in self-respect, in freedom, in choosing a path that aligns with his truth. In a world that tells men their value only exists through serving others, choosing yourself isn't weakness. It's wisdom. And that wisdom? It leads to the kind of peace most married men only remember from before they said, I do. Number 9. Biological reality versus social myth. Biology doesn't care about romance novels or wedding vows. It's not politically correct. It doesn't conform to fairy tales. It simply is. And here's a truth that many men quietly carry but rarely say aloud. Lifelong monogamy, as prescribed by modern culture, does not align with how most men are wired. It's not about lust or immorality. It's about nature. Evolution didn't program men for permanent exclusivity. It programmed them for expansion, for drive, for pursuit. Yet culture demands they deny that truth in silence, shame, or secrecy. The result? Resentment, affairs, numbness, or worse, lifelong emotional disconnection hidden beneath loyalty masks. When a man suppresses his biological truth in the name of social acceptance, he often finds himself living a contradiction. He's told that real men stay faithful, but never told how to handle the natural impulses that don't vanish just because he said, I do. So he buries them. But buried instincts don't die, they fester. They leak out in boredom, irritability, quiet sadness. Not because he's a villain, but because he's human. And humans suffer when they're forced to pretend. But there's another path, one built not on fantasy, but on truth. When a man is honest about his needs, his nature, and his limits, when he builds relationships rooted in realism, not myth, he breaks free from the psychological trap. He doesn't need to lie. He doesn't need to cheat. He simply needs truth. And truth, unlike the modern script of marriage, doesn't demand that he amputate parts of himself to be loved. It invites him to be whole and to be accepted as such. Because in the end, it's not monogamy that breaks men. It's the pressure to pretend that biology doesn't matter. Number 10. The silent mental health crisis. Every year, the silent mental health crisis among men deepens, yet remains largely invisible to society. more men are taking their own lives, caught in the suffocating grip of depression, burnout, and emotional starvation. Despite this growing tragedy, the common narrative still blames men for their struggles, labeling them as the problem rather than recognizing the wounds beneath their silence. The truth is, no one really asks the married man how he's doing, how he feels beneath the surface, because society expects men to endure hardship without complaint, to carry their burdens alone. This expectation that men must be stoic, unshakable, and emotionally reserved isn't just outdated, it's dangerously isolating. Feeling is not a weakness, but the very essence of being human. When men are denied the space to express pain or vulnerability, that pain festers unseen and unaddressed. In this context, the man who chooses to avoid marriage may not be rejecting love or commitment, but rather making a conscious decision to protect his mental and emotional health. For him, marriage might represent not a haven, but a slow, relentless emotional death, a place where his suffering is ignored, dismissed, or minimized. Choosing life over silence, he resists the societal pressure that demands endurance at the cost of his well-being. This choice challenges the myth of the unbreakable man and opens a crucial conversation about redefining masculinity, not as the absence of feeling, but as the courage to confront it honestly. Ultimately, acknowledging this silent crisis is the first step toward healing a generation of men who have been taught to suffer in silence. Modern marriage is not built for men, it's built on them. Their love is taken, their labor is expected, their voice is silenced, and when it breaks them, no one notices. But there's power in walking away, power in saying, "I choose peace over pressure." A man who refuses the trap isn't broken, he's awakened. And sometimes, not getting married is the most radical form of self-respect a man can choose. If this message hits something deep, you're not alone. More men are waking up every day. It's time we start having real conversations. Not to hate women, but to protect men. To guard our minds, our hearts, our futures. Subscribe to Stoic 95 if you're ready to reclaim your power, your peace, and your purpose. Your mind is yours. Don't give it away. This is Stoic 95. Stay sharp,